We are facing a situation where, as with national government, local government is broken, and a big part of that is that there is too much waste, there is too much debt, and these councils are servicing huge volumes of debt. The councils that are up for election on Thursday, in aggregate, owe about £12 billion, and the interest alone on that is costing £1.3 million every day. So the first thing is we need to get back on control of the finances. We need to audit these councils properly. We need a fresh look. We need new councillors who will take their experience from outside of politics.
Do you mean cuts?
Can you promise that you're not going to cut SEND services?
Can
you promise that you will not cut SEND services come Thursday? If Reform run any councils at all, can you promise you will not cut social care or SEND services?
I can't promise what any new council administration will do.
Wow.
Because that is up,
so you cannot
for those who are going to be elected
you cannot
on
promise
Thursday.
you're not going to cut SEND services.
What I can promise
Gosh.
is that the mindset that new councillors will come in, will look at things very carefully, very, very closely, and we need to get the finances right. We need to stop the bleeding before we can treat the patient. This is what local government say, it's broken, it needs fixing.
Daisy, can you make that promise?
In my local area, what I can tell you is that we have a plan.
Can you make the promise you asked him to make?
Lots of Liberal Democrat-run councillors are looking at SEND services, and they're looking at the contracts that have been put out time and time again. We will do everything in our power to protect SEND services, but all we hear from Reform is they think these are made up. They think that it's made up conditions. We take SEND seriously, and we are fighting tooth and nail in Parliament and in county halls around the country.
I just find it a bit ridiculous that we're on about disillusionment, but within seconds of the debate starting, days, you immediately cut off Reform and started trying to give them a gotcha question. I'm not voting for Reform, but I disagree with that sort of culture that we've got into, where you're interrupting each other, not letting each other finish. In Beverley today, Reform, Labour and Conservatives were out, but they were actually listening to each other, having a discussion. Why can't you do that in front of us? You cannot control what each council does. Lib Dems are spending 20 million on Queen's Gardens. Council taxes have gone up in Hull and East Riding. You can't control that. You're national politicians. Local councils are separate from you.
Despite the incredible inheritance we got from the Tories with a £22 billion black hole in the public finances, and local government has had an increase of nearly 7% in their funding. That's the biggest increase that they've had for years. And we want councils to start focusing on fixing the problems that people are bothered about. Fly tipping on their streets, people are furious about. We've got more potholes on the roads in England than there are craters on the moon. We need councils to get serious about spending that money to fix the things that people...
Steve, why am I getting for fly tipping? Labour Council's got the worst record.
Do you know which council's got the highest fly tipping in the whole country? Croydon. And it's run by the Conservative Party. It's run by the Tories, and they've made it an absolute disgrace. If you want to talk about fly tipping, we're going to crack down on fly tippers. I believe that those who make the mess should clear up the mess. So we're going to make people join clean-up squads as a deterrent to those who are thinking of fly tipping, a punishment for those that have done it, and to make sure that our roads are much cleaner than they were allowed to get under the Conservative Party.
Since basically Margaret Thatcher sold off a whole load of social housing and the profits never got reinvested, we have constantly had demand outstripping supply. We have got to build more social homes. We went into the general election saying we would commit to having 150,000 social homes being built every single year. Under the Conservatives, when they were in power from 2015 to 2024, it was an average of 7,000, where we need 150,000. So the first thing is we have got to build more social homes, and I really hope the Labour government finally come up with a target soon, because they don't have one yet. We've got to, I think, regulate Airbnbs, because we've got a lot of people who have all these flats and they rent them out for a Friday night, Saturday night, when people could be living there and building their lives in those communities. We've got to have a use it or lose it rule for developers who can land bank and sit on pieces of land.
And will Liberal Democrat councils allow the development?
Absolutely.
Because Liberal Democrats can be pretty NIMBY as well.
Look at Eastleigh, look at Kingston in London, look at Portsmouth, look at Oby and Wigton. These are councils. I mean, Eastleigh is building more homes than it's even been told it has to build, because we believe in council and social housing. Those are the homes that our communities really need. The problem we have at the moment is that the Conservatives and now Labour have a top-down system that doesn't deliver the homes that we need to end homelessness and years-long waiting lists.
So I want to raise the thresholds for things like corporation tax, VAT, to support small businesses directly. And if you do that, you will get more businesses growing.
Be honest with people.
By growing more.
Be honest with people.
This is what you used to believe in. Your party used to believe.
Listen,
cutting taxes, growing the economy, getting people in work.
Exactly what I do believe in.
And if your party did it, I wouldn't need to be here. Reform wouldn't need to exist.
I also live in the real world. In terms of the online sales tax, it sounds good in principle. We imposed a digital services tax on some of those big retailers you're talking about. They passed that cost straight on to consumers. You be honest with the people here and the people at home, those costs of an online sales tax would be added to prices by those platforms. That is the reality. Prices would go up.
Can I say,
how do you think we should deal with Trump's trade war?
Right. Daisy Cooper.
I think the first thing we've got to do is talk tough. I think there's only one language that Donald Trump understands, and that is the language of strength. And so we should be talking tough. And we've urged the governments to launch a Buy British campaign so we can show that we're not going to take those tariffs lying down. The second thing is we've got to realign our economic alliances. We've got to work with our European and Commonwealth allies to create an economic coalition of the willing to stand up collectively against Donald Trump's tariffs as well. And the third thing we've got to do is make sure that if we're going to have a negotiation with the US about a trade deal, when you go into a negotiation, you have to show that there is another option on the table. And we've said, actually, you know, it is possible to get a trade deal with the US on services, but at the same time, we need a trade deal with the EU on goods. And we think that the government should be accelerating those negotiations to get a customs union with the EU as quickly as possible to boost trade for British businesses.
Alex, if Nigel Farage was Prime Minister, you'd be cozying up to Trump and doing everything he says, wouldn't you?
I think if Nigel Farage was Prime Minister, we'd have a much stronger chance of getting the deal that we need, and because he has that relationship with Don. He's a critical friend, but he is a friend nonetheless, but he is critical nonetheless. And, you know,
But do you accept that Trump's trade war is harming the cost of living for ordinary people?
the idea of tariffs as a general principle is one that I am very much against. It doesn't help anybody to be, you know, putting tariffs on here, you know, and responding and then responding and responding and escalating. It doesn't help anybody at all.
There's lots that needs to be done. Some people have made the points tonight that we need to have a more constructive form of politics. We need to be able to discuss here or in Parliament areas where we agree, and we need to be able to have a constructive discussion where we don't agree. We need
So would you end oppositional
local
politics? You know,
well,
when you've got
I
two
definitely
sides?
feel it needs to be a lot less yaboo. I've said that lots of times. What I do also think, though, is that politics is really opening up in terms of how people are going to vote. It's clear the two-party system has broken down. I do think that's a permanent thing. If you look at what happened in the general election and right across the country now, we've got so many seats where it's a five-party fight for elections this Thursday. No one knows which way key races are going to go. So it's really clear that people do feel genuinely let down for very good reasons from two old parties that have not delivered for too long, whether it's on the NHS being overstretched, lack of affordable housing, or the fact that we're wondering, are we going to have a livable future? The question is, do people go down a reform route, which, if you look at the detail, is only really about supporting the very richest in society, or do you come behind a hopeful vision of the future, which the Greens are offering, which is about a safe environment, but about tackling inequality, rebuilding our public services, and the affordable housing that we need?
I mean, aren't we looking at, you know, the reality here? Five parties here. You two are on the right. You three are sort of on the centre-left.
I don't see that. I don't see.
That's how you're all going to link up.
Rupert Lowe, the former one of the leading protagonists within Reform, himself called Reform a protest party. When you're casting your vote on Thursday, do not use that vote to protest. Use it to elect good people like Anne Hanley, who's in Hull and East Yorkshire, who's a proven local leader, who has made sure that the East Riding is one of the fastest growing economies in parts of the UK. Or in Lincolnshire, you've got some excellent councillors. Make sure you vote for a good councillor who's going to make a difference.
What's wrong with a protest vote if you're fed up?
Sorry?
What's wrong with a protest vote?
Well, it's not that I don't understand it. I'm just saying that's not the right thing to do, because you won't get the outcomes you want.
What I hope voters will choose to do, we elected a government 10 months ago that's delivering a plan for change. We need councillors in town halls to work with us on things like sorting out the cost of living crisis, sorting out the broken National Health Service, cleaning up sewage from our rivers, lakes and seas. People have got a choice. They can vote for that change, or they can vote to go back to where we were before last July.
Absolutely, we have a choice. And we have a choice between a political class that has taken your vote for granted for far too long and new parties.
You are the political class. You've been a Conservative
We were a councillor for 20 years. How are you new?
But I'm not particularly typical of a lot of our candidates.
But
a lot of our candidates, they're putting their head above the parapet. They're standing for common sense in the local community for the first time because they're so fed up with how the political system has treated them up till now.
I'm just going to end this round by coming back to George, who asked this question. What's your own answer as where we should be? You're what? You're 18 years old?
Yeah, that's right.
Worried about your future? What do you think they should do?
Look, selfishly, I've got plans. I'd like to work on the continent and travel freely, so naturally it suits me to join the EU, but from
You want to join the EU again?
I would.
How old were you when we Brexited?
I was 9. So, times change, but
Times change.
18 years old now, looking to move to the continent. I quite like the idea of rejoining.
Okay.
And personally, from hearing the discussions today, I don't really feel as though the UK is strong enough by itself to talk tough to President Trump. Personally, I'd feel as though we'd be much stronger with a customs union, a single market, even the entire EU, but definitely a single market. Like, do you guys agree with that? That would be much stronger with a
We're going to
customs
hold
union
that as a
behind it?
rhetorical question. Thank you very much indeed for your thought, George.